George Herbert is one of my favorite poets of all time also. And that poem called Love, Love bade me welcome, and my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin, appeals enormously to me. So for a while, I actually was trying to imitate John Donne, George Herbert, and of course, Gerard Manley Hopkins. But you can't do that. You can do it for a while, but it doesn't work. You learn techniques, perhaps, by doing that, but you don't learn how to write poems or good poems.
Oh my goodness, it's certainly the wonderful thing about our tradition is how rich it is, and to say one alone. Just the other night, a student came up to me, and she had just read my novel, The Ninth Hour, and she said, "This is the first Catholic novel I've ever read. What Catholic novel should I read next?" And of course I said to her, "Read Wise Blood, so that you will never think you understand what a Catholic novel is." You know?
There's some filmmakers from the last 50 so years that I feel like are in that spot. Tarkovsky is the first one that comes to mind. Not a Roman Catholic, but Russian Orthodox, and extremely faith-driven artist. I feel that way very much about Martin Scorsese's work. And the funny thing is, in film, it's like I find myself drawn to like the ex-Catholics, you know. And Scorsese's funny because I don't think he wouldn't want to be called an ex-Catholic at all. But that's how he's thought of. But there are other filmmakers who identify as, you know, sort of ex-Catholic or in this liminal space where they haven't left it entirely, but they know that they're on the outs, you know?
Well, I think one of the Catholic writers that was not a Roman Catholic, but Dostoevsky, hangs large over the Catholic imagination. Dostoevsky was one of those writers who was looking into saints' lives and trying to understand the way that people lived out their holiness, especially in such doubt and dark places that Dostoevsky often ventured into. And he becomes a model for some of my favorite Roman Catholic writers, such as Walker Percy, Caroline Gordon, Flannery O'Connor, a lot of these writers that are kind of imitating or copying what Dostoevsky was so successful at doing with looking at spirituality and looking at how a person can actually follow Christ.
It has to be John Hassler. And if I had to choose one, I would say it was North of Hope. It is North of Hope. I read and reread that one. I find him more generous and capacious than even some of the greats. I'm not a fan of Flannery O'Connor. Sorry, all the folks around here who like Flannery O'Connor, but I think John Hassler has a lot to offer, and that's why I'm here. I'm the Apostle John to John Hassler. Has to be Denise Levertov. I brought her to Marquette in '96 and interviewed her, and I've been reading and teaching her poetry for decades, and I think people looking at my poetry will say, "Oh yeah, there's that Levertov influence there." So she's my favorite Catholic poet.
I have a list. My new favorite Catholic novel is Randy Boyagoda's original print. I also loved Beggar's Feast. It's stunning. I think very. It's more of solemn tone, where original print is more comic. But as far as classic examples, Francois Mauriac's Viper's Tangle, the reversal in that, the dramatic shift in the middle is choice. And let's see, Bernard Arnault's Diary of a Country Priest. It's really indispensable. And then the way I found out about both of those writers was by reading the letters of Flannery O'Connor and her The Violent Bear It Away, which she called a very minor hymn to the Eucharist. I think is really, really wonderful.
Brideshead Revisited, which I love for many reasons. Partly because it's just a beautiful story. Partly because I think it sheds light on a tradition in the church, which is that of gay Catholics, that has always been a part of the church as far as I know, but hasn't been explicitly talked about in the same ways that it was talked about in Brideshead. And also because it's a story about a conversion. And so that's a really important novel to me. I love the novel Silence, which is a great mystery. And I love it in part because of that mystery of what is the right thing to do, what is the most important part of faith.
One book I really like is Georges Bernanot's Diary of a Country Priest, because it's about a saint who doesn't know he's a saint, and no one else knows he's a saint either. And so Bernanot explores what Christ looks like when everyone involved is unaware that Christ is present in the moment. The priest has some moments where he sort of sees it, and he'll associate it mostly with the sacraments.
So the whole central idea of the Diary of a Country Priest is to bring across that journey that he goes, and it's a way of the cross in a sense, because he has stomach cancer, he's unaware of it, he's misunderstood by his parishioners, he's working in a de-Christianized environment, and he still has this moment when he's talking to the local countess, a very strong, influential woman who has blocked her family out after the death of her son and who has considered herself very close to God. And he says, hell is not to love anymore, madame. And that at that moment, she is broken. And then the eruption of grace, so that way in which he's a conduit for grace. I think it's just fantastic, yeah.
Thinking about Hopkins in his articulation of ecstasy, of great joy, the clanging, beautiful, overwhelming music of his poems, these lyrical effusions. There's a line in all this juice and all this joy, which is such a sensual and even sexual, erotic image, and at the same time was so deeply able to articulate the dark places of the human mind when he was suffering from depression and acedia and the rest of it. And those dark sonnets are among the best and most beautiful explorations of the hard places that we also endure as human beings and as people of faith. So he kind of was able to span the breadth of and maybe the depth of human experience, the internal human experience.
In 2012, I published a biography of the poet Denise Levertov, who became a Catholic late in her life. I don't know if you know her, but she is a magnificent poet. And that was because she believed as a poet, you paid attention. That was the first requisite for being a poet. And once you've paid attention, the other enters into you and you can't let it be destroyed. And so it was from poetry that she became an advocate for all kinds of social justice commitments. And it was that, plus the aesthetics of Catholicism, that led her to convert.
For me, the first person I thought of was Greene, just because he's someone I was introduced to relatively early. And if you happen to be a very sleazy person, it's extremely comforting to find out that one of the sort of great Catholic writers also was very good at portraying extremely sordid people, nonetheless being loved by God, even if they can't see that in themselves. I just reread The Power and the Glory, and it's sort of a really beautiful and consoling, right, picture of someone who thinks that he is not rising to the occasion.
My teacher, Marie Ponceau, who died in July, was a great poet and a great Catholic poet, and she has been an indelible influence on me in every possible way, in my teaching and my writing. She was my teacher in workshops for 11 years. And the way that she thought about everything and the way that she lived her life are wonderful examples. And also her writing is just that good.
There's a poet here at the Catholic Imagination Conference, John F. Dean, who his poetry speaks very, very much to me of what I was describing, which is like the sort of the dirt and grit of the human experience, the flesh-bound nature of it, and the expansive up and down, you know, to eternity and in roots into the earth and the clay and the creation. His poetry really opens that world up for me.
And this is where Simone Weil, I think, helped me a lot. She has a phrase called l'attente de Dieu, which means waiting on God. It's hard to translate it exactly into English, but it's waiting, not waiting for God, but waiting on God, attending to God. And you do that through prayer. You also do it through what I've been describing as a form of mysticism, I suppose, where you stop and you listen and you pray that way. So I took from her this notion of waiting on God and waiting on inspiration.